Dear students, welcome back to this video. Now in this video, we are going to see another technique for performance appraisal. What is the name of that technique? We are going to learn how to use paired comparison method. Now this method is a little bit tricky. Here is all the details of this method. However, before taking you through all of these details, I want to take you somewhere else. It's been too long I used something like whiteboard. So in order to make sure that you learn this concept very well, so I'm going to use something like a whiteboard and draw the whole concept there. All right. So let's go there. All right. In this canvas or whiteboard, we are going to see how to do a paired comparison among 4 employees. Now let's assume there is an HR manager in company A. Sorry for my poor handwriting here. Now in company A, we have 4 employees. So number 1, we have Shalima. Number 2, we have Bani. Number 3, we have Kingshuk. And finally, we have JSH. I'm sure you know who is that, right? So let's assume we have these 4 employees in this organization or this company A. Now we are going to do a performance appraisal using paired comparison method. Now for this, the first thing we have to do is we have to create a table. So let's do that first. So I'm going to create this table in fast forward mode. Alright, now I'm really sorry for this poor table. My drawing skills is really poor. Now, the next thing we have to do is write all of these names in this table. Now observe carefully. We have to write all of these names in 2 places. We have to write all of these names at the top of the columns and at the beginning of the rows. So now let us do that first. So again, I'm going to do it in fast forward mode. So let's start. So yes, our table is ready and we have entered all the names in the column head and the row beginning of this table. The next task is really easy. What are we going to do next? We are going to compare the performance of each of these employees. Again, we are going to compare the performance of each of these employees. Don't worry, let's start the process and within the next 2 or 3 minutes you will be able to understand the whole concept very easily. Okay, now the first thing that we need to do is we have to fix a quality that we are going to compare. Again, we are going to fix a quality that we are going to compare among these employees. Now, what are the qualities that we can compare? It can be anything. We can compare leadership quality, we can compare productivity of each of these employees, then we can also compare adaptability of the employees, right? So again, it can be anything. Now, for your ease of understanding, I'm choosing a quality that's more relatable to you. Now, let's assume for this table, we are going to measure the performance in terms of office attendance. So we are going to find out among these 4 employees who always comes to office on time and who comes to office regularly. So let's write down the quality over here. Office attendance. So this is the quality that we are going to measure here. Now let's start the comparison in this table. Now before I start, I must tell you this. Each of the column in this table belongs to one specific person. Again, each of the column of this table belongs to one specific person. So this column belongs to Shalima, this column belongs to Bunny, this column belongs to Kingshuk, and this column belongs to JSH. So it belongs to me. Now, we are going to fill out each of the cells in each of the columns one by one. So first we are going to fill out this cell, then we are going to fill out this cell, and so on. So let's start with this cell first. If you take a look at this cell, at the top of this cell we have Shalima, and to the left of this cell we have also Shalima. So in this cell we are going to compare the performance of Shalima with Shalima. Again, in this cell, we are going to compare the performance of Shalima with Shalima once again. Now, I know this does not make sense, right? I mean, comparing your own performance with yourself does not make sense. So for this reason, we are going to keep this cell empty. Do not worry, the process is going to be crystal clear very soon. Let's move on to the next cell in this column. Now here, listen to me very carefully. At the top of this cell, we have Shalima, and to the left, we have Bunny. So in this cell, we are going to compare the office attendance performance between Shalima and Bunny. Again, in this cell, we are going to compare the office attendance performance between Shalima and Bunny. Now, how do we compare it? Let's assume that going through the office record, we found out that Shalima has a better performance in terms of office attendance than Bunny. So she is more regular in the office. Again, just to tell you, this is a hypothetical example. So please, Bunny, do not mind, alright? This is all made up. So yes, in comparison between Shalima and Bunny, the office attendance is better for Shalima. So what do we do here in this cell? Now, as I said, this column belongs to Shalima. So here we are going to put a plus sign. So let's put a plus sign here. Because between Shalima and Bunny, Shalima's performance was better in terms of office attendance. And as I said earlier, this column belongs to Shalima. So in all of the cells of this column, I am going to describe Shalima's performance. Now between Shalima and Bunny, as Shalima performed better, so I put a plus sign here. So again, whenever a person at the top of the column performs better in comparison to the other one, we put a plus sign. And whenever a person in this column performs worse compared to the other person, we put a minus sign here. Now again, as Shalima did better compared to Bunny, so here we put a plus sign. Alright, now we are done with this cell. Now let's move on to the next cell here. So in this cell, we are going to compare the performance once again. Now what are we going to do here? We are going to compare the performance between Shalima and to the left, Kingshuk. Again, performance comparison between Shalima and Kingshuk. Now again going to the office record, we found out that Shalima has a better attendance compared to Kingshuk. So again, Shalima wins here. So that is why we have to put another plus sign here. So let's do that. So I'm putting another plus sign. Why? Because this is a positive thing for Shalima. Shalima wins against Kingshuk. Now let's move on to the next cell. In this cell, we are going to do comparison between whom? Between Shalima and to the left we have JFH. So between Shalima and JFH. Now going through the office records, we found out that Shalima wins once again because JFH does not come to office at all. He is a great fakibaj, alright? So yes, Shalima wins once again. So let's put another plus sign for Shalima. So yes, in this column we have compared the performance of Shalima with each individual person here. So we are done with this column. Now let's move on to the next column. I'm going to show you the entry for each cell in this column as well, and then we are going to draw a conclusion about this whole process. So let's start with this cell here. So in this cell, we are going to compare the performance between Bunny and Shalima. Now if you remember, we have already done the comparison between Bunny and Shalima. Where? Just right here. So here we have compared the performance between Bunny and Shalima, right? And we found out that Shalima is a better performer. So we have put a plus sign here. So again, between these two, Shalima was the better performer, right? Now let's come back to this cell. So here, between Bunny and Shalima, we already know that Shalima is a better performer. Now, can you make a guess? In this cell here, do we put a plus sign or a minus sign? Think for 30 seconds. Yes, we are back. The answer is not going to be a plus sign. Rather, the answer is going to be a negative or a minus sign. So I put a minus sign here. Now, can you think why have we put a minus sign here? Let me explain. Between Shalima and Bunny, obviously Shalima is the better performer, as we have found out before. But this cell belongs to whom? This cell belongs to Bunny. Why? Because, as we said just earlier, all the cells in this column belongs to Bunny here. Again, all the cells in this column specifically belongs to Bunny. So whatever information we put in these cells should describe Bunny's performance. So between Shalima and Bunny, we can obviously say that Shalima wins, or in other words, Bunny loses. Now, as we are describing Bunny's performance in this cell, we have to put a negative sign or a minus sign because Bunny has lost to Shalima and losing is something negative for Bunny. So I guess it's clear now. So for the same outcome, we are putting a plus sign in this cell. Why? Because between Shalima and Bunny, Shalima won and winning is something positive for Shalima. However, for the same outcome, we are putting a negative sign in this cell. Why? Because in that same outcome, Bunny lost and losing is something negative for Bunny. And as in all of these cells of this column, we are going to describe Bunny. So that's why from Bunny's perspective, we put a minus sign here. Now let's move on to the next cell. So here we compare Bunny with Bunny. Now just as I explained earlier, comparing yourself with yourself doesn't make sense. So this cell is going to remain empty. Let's move on to the next cell. So we are going to compare the performance of office attendance between Bunny and King Shuk here. Now have we made this comparison before? No, we haven't. If you take a look at this column, we have not compared these two people's performance. So we are doing it for the first time. So between King Shuk and Bunny, let's assume that Bunny is a better performer. So again, Bunny wins here. So do we put a plus sign or a minus sign here? Yes, we put a plus sign. Why? Because this cell belongs to this column and this column belongs to Bunny. So as we are describing Bunny here, so we are putting a plus sign because Bunny won in this case. So let's move on to the last cell. So we are going to compare the performance between Bunny and JSH. Now again, let's assume that JSH is a very poor attendance guy. So he does not come to office regularly. So in comparison between these two, Bunny wins. So we put a plus sign here again. So let's do that. So yes, we are done with this column as well. So we are done describing Bunny's performance. Now I guess you have already understood how to fill out these columns or these cells, right? Now in this column, I'm going to measure the performance of King Shuk, and in the next column, I'm going to compare the performance of JSH. Now I'm not going to explain each of these cells to you. Rather, I'm going to fill those out in fast forward mode. Wait for 10 seconds. We are done filling out the table and we have compared each and everyone's performance with each individual. Now we are at the very last step. What we have to do now? Let's draw a line here. Yes. Now, the last step is to count all of these plus signs. So we are going to count how many positives does Shalima have, how many positive signs does Bunny have, how many positives does King Shuk have, and finally how many positive signs does JSH have. So as we can see here clearly, Shalima has 3, Bunny has 2, King Shuk has 1, and finally JSH is the worst performer, so he has a big 0 here. So yes, we are done. Now from this table and from these numbers, we can easily say that in terms of office attendance, Shalima is the best performer among these 4. Why? Because she has the highest number of positive signs. And on the other hand, JSH is the worst performer. So this in summary is a paired comparison method. Why do we call it paired comparison? Because again, we are comparing performance, and if you take a look, we are comparing in pairs. So we are comparing Shalima and Bunny. So this is a pair. Then again, we are comparing Shalima and King Shuk. Again, this is another pair. And finally, we are comparing Shalima and JSH. So again, this is another pair. So all of the comparisons are taking place in pairs. So that is why this method is called a paired comparison method. So yes, I guess the whole method is crystal clear to you now. So the main summary is, whoever has the highest score is the best performer in that quality or criteria. So here, In terms of office attendance, Shalima is the best performer among these four. So let's go back to the presentation again. Alright, we are back from the whiteboard. So we have seen in detail how to use a paired comparison method, right? Now, just to make sure that you have learned all the points properly, I'm going to just read these points out. So the first point in paired comparison method is compare each employee with another employee in terms of particular trait or quality. So yes, that is exactly what we did there. We compared employees in pairs. Next, a chart is made for a particular quality listing all the employees to be considered, and they are placed side by side with one another. So on the X and Y axis so that they can be compared. So you can see here a chart, an X and Y axis, right? But just to make things easy for you, I have used a table, but it's the same thing. So in that table, we listed all the employees and compared them or placed them side by side. Now after that, a plus is given if an employee is better than the other employee, and a minus is given if an employee is worse than the another employee. So yes, that is exactly what we did. Next, finally we identify the employee who has received the highest number of pluses. Yes, again, we found out that in the last table, Shalima got the highest number of pluses. And finally, we decided that yes, that employee is better than all other employees in that particular trait. So in terms of office attendance, Shalima was the best employee of all. So that is how we used a pair comparison method. So before closing of the video, I'm going to show you another example very briefly. So as you can see here, we have two tables. On the left hand side table, we do the comparison for quality of work among multiple employees. And in the right hand side table, in another example, we compare the creativity of multiple employees. Now if we take a look at the left hand side, let's check who has the highest number of pluses here. So employee A or Art has 1, 2 pluses. Employee B or Maria has 1, 2, 3, 4 pluses. Employee C has 1 and 2 pluses. D has 1 plus and E has 1 plus. So as we can easily see that Maria or employee B has the highest number of pluses. And that's why she is the best performer in terms of quality of work among all the employees. So again, that is how we use paired comparison method. So I'm not going to explain the creativity quality here because I'm sure you can understand that on your own, alright? So yes, we are successfully done with paired comparison method. So in the next video, we are going to come up with another performance appraisal technique.